As I read the letters written by the Apostle Paul, it seems that he ran across the same problem over and over again. It seems in almost every place, in every context, the same situation would surface. I find it especially in Corinth when Paul writes in the 9th chapter of 1 Corinthians to this group of believers. These are people who know a great deal about the faith. They know all about the life they are intended to live. They have the details and the facts. They are straight on doctrine. And yet these people who seem to know so much about the faith seem not to be able and willing to live out that faith. So I love in 1 Corinthians 9 where Paul writes to believers like that, and he says to them, you have the answers, you know the truth. Now it's time to live a certain way. And the specific context here is to live the way of service, to enter into relationship with other people for the purpose of serving. These are people who knew all about service. They taught about service. They read books about service. They loved the understanding of service, but they weren't getting to the point of actually practicing service. And so Paul wrote to them and he said, it's time for you to serve. This is our next spiritual practice. It's called service, entering into relationship with other people for the purpose of service. We do all these other things, and we do this as well. As he does so often, Paul uses himself as an example, and he talks about his freedom in Christ to give his life away, the freedom in Christ he has to be a slave to everyone, the freedom he has to serve. The people in Corinth, other people, probably you, probably me, we know this. We know all about serving, but often we don't take the next step and actually serve. So they would have responded to Paul and they would have said, you mean we actually have to do something about this? And Paul's answer is, yes, that's exactly the point. Have you discovered in your life that Christian maturity doesn't just happen automatically? Have you seen by this point that all this transformation and growth that we're trying to talk about isn't something that just happens, but that evidently we have to get up and we have to take steps and we have to move in a certain direction? That's what Paul's trying to say here, I think, to the Corinthians, and I think that's what Paul would say to us as well. What he does here reminds me of some words of one of my favorite writers. He's not known as a theologian, but I think he actually has some pretty good theology. His name was Dr. Seuss, and listen to the way he talks about not putting into practice the things that we know. He wrote a little story one time called The Waiting Place, and here's what it says. He says, you'll come to a place where the streets are not marked, some windows are lighted, but mostly they're dark. A place you could sprain both your elbow and chin. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? How much can you lose? How much can you win? And if you go in, should you turn left or right and 3/4, or maybe not quite, or go around back and sneak in from behind? Simple it's not. I'm afraid you will find for a mind maker upper to make up his mind. You can get so confused that you'll start into race down long wiggled roads at a breaknecking pace and grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed, I fear, for a most useless place, the waiting place. For people just waiting for a train to go or a bus to come or a plane to go or the mail to come or the rain to go or the phone to ring or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or a no, or waiting around for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting. Waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for the wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or waiting perhaps for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig with curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. But that's not for you. If Paul had wanted to sound a little bit like Dr. Seuss, his words to the Corinthians might have sounded a little bit like this. He would have said, my dear friends in Corinth, you have a great nerve. You gather for worship and say, we must serve. But talking won't cut it. It's time now to do. It's time to live boldly. I'm talking to you. So jump in the race, get ready to run. We're playing no game. We're serving the Son. See, Paul knows that this Christian life that we talk so much about, it won't happen automatically. It won't happen magically. And he knows that this thing, this practice called service, won't happen accidentally. So Paul talks about running the race. And he talks about acting on what he knows. He talks about following the rules. He doesn't just wave his arms in the air and shadow box. He lives on purpose. He controls himself. He acts on what he knows to be true, and so he lives as a servant to others. Paul knows that he is completely free in Christ, and what that means is that he's free to give his life away for other people. Richard Foster, in his book, Celebration of Discipline, gives some examples to us of what it might look like to serve, and I love this list. Consider these possibilities. He says, first of all, there is the service of hiddenness, doing what we can do to serve others and not letting anybody know what we're doing. There's the service of small things that are really important to people who need those small things. I think about that woman in Acts 9 who made robes and clothing for the widows, a very small thing, but I promise it was not a small thing to the widows. Richard Foster talks about the service of guarding the reputation of others. He talks about the service of being served, actually doing others the favor of letting them serve you. He talks about the service of common courtesy and the service of hospitality. He talks about the service of listening. He talks about the service of bearing one another's burdens. And finally, he talks about the service of sharing the word of life with people who haven't heard it. Jesus picked up a towel and he washed his disciples' feet. He served them, and then he said, if I can do this for you, then you can live this way toward other people. It's not really that hard. We already know how to do it. We have to decide only if we're willing and ready to do that. I love the way Dallas Willard wraps up his conversation about service. He says that serving others in the spirit of Jesus allows us the freedom of humility, no appearances, just a heart of genuine service. And then he uses the image of the potter and the clay to describe what this looks like. And he says that we should be what we are, just a particularly lively piece of clay who, as a servant of God, happens to be here now with the ability to do this good and needful thing for that other piece of clay. That's the spiritual practice of serving, doing what we can do to meet the needs of other people.